Thanks for joining us this week for a brand new episode of Up in the Air. I'm Hunter Williams.
And I'm Nathan Flinchbaugh.
It's hard to believe it, but this week's episode is our last episode before Thanksgiving break, but we'll be back in 2 weeks with our final episode of the fall semester.
But in the meantime, we have a great episode this week. The Weather Risk Management Club will stop by later to talk about the effects of winter weather on some of the major road networks across the country.
That's right. We'll also have more on the drought out west and some details on why the CIA might be concerned with climate.
Casey will also be by later to give you your climate outlook.
We'll have all of that and more in just a bit, but here's Update in the Air. With the ongoing historic drought in California, lawmakers in the Golden State have done their part to ensure that water consumption is reduced during these strenuous times. Earlier this year, California Governor Jerry Brown and the State Water Resources Control Board passed statewide regulations on water usage, including rules that prohibit residents from watering their lawns within 48 hours of measurable rainfall and prohibit restaurants from serving water unless requested by the customer. With strong El Nino conditions currently in the Pacific Ocean and the potential for big winter storms out west, the future of some of these regulations is being called into question. In fact, as soon as January, the State Water Resources Control Board will be able to vote on whether or not to extend these regulations through April of next year, while the decision makers wait to see how much precipitation falls over the course of the winter. On top of this, by next summer, the board will have public input and vote on making some or all of the water management regulations permanent. Many environmentalists are in favor of such measures, and Sarah Aminzadeh, executive director of the California Coastkeeper Alliance, says it only makes sense to build on what we have done so far.
A wintry blast of air brought intense cold and blizzard-like conditions to the West Coast after whipping up a damaging tornado in central California and buffeting the Los Angeles metro area with 70-mile-per-hour gusts earlier in the week. Drivers in Southern California were urged to use caution traveling through passes and canyons where winds roared and light snow fell as low as 4,000 feet. Broken tree limbs contributed to scattered power outages as well. California in particular continues to anxiously await winter rains as it seeks relief from the record-setting 4-year drought it's currently experiencing. Although this round of heavy rain and snow brought some improvement to the driest area of the country, it has not erased the state's extreme water deficit. As always, more information regarding the drought in California will be a topic of conversation later in the show during our Climate Outlook.
Speaking at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C., Director of the CIA, John Brennan, said that CIA analysts view climate change as a deeper cause of the instability in places like Syria, Iraq, Ukraine, Yemen, and Libya. According to Brennan, when looking for deeper causes of instability in these areas, CIA analysts find nationalistic, sectarian, and technological factors that are eroding the structure of the international system on top of socioeconomic trends and potential impacts from climate change. Brennan emphasized that extreme weather and the accompanying food and water policies can often worsen or create a humanitarian crisis. In specific, Brennan referenced sharply reduced crop yields, especially when they occur in several locations simultaneously, as they can result in a shock to food prices, particularly in previously fragile regions in Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia.
Scientists have just mapped the weather of perhaps the windiest planet found in the solar system to date, exoplanet HD 189733b, which sits approximately 60 light years away from planet Earth, recently clocked wind speeds at an astounding 5,400 miles per hour. Translate these winds to Earth, and it would be 7 times faster than the speed of sound. The extrasolar weather report was published recently in the Astrophysical Journal Letters. As you're probably wondering, how exactly was this measurement taken? Well, first off, this planet is an ideal target for studying. The fact that it is 10% larger than Jupiter makes it a good observational target for scientists. The observations were made with space telescopes. When a planet passes in front of its star, this tells us virtually everything we need to know about exoplanets. Scientists can look at the fading and winking of a star's visible light and use those changes to model the planets that must be passing in front of it. The hope is that researchers can look into other exoplanets, particularly those with similar characteristics to Earth. We'll be back in a moment with more. Thanks for tuning back in.
We're now joined by Scott Matuszewski and Erica Beddings of the Weather Risk Management Club, who have some great winter weather information. Scott, could you discuss the impact that snowstorms have on some of our country's major roadways?
Thanks for having us today. As we all know, winter is fast approaching, and soon, winter storms capable of serious damage will be forming all over the country. In fact, some areas of the U.S. have already seen snow pile up on their roadways. With this early start to winter in some areas, road crews from all over the country are quickly preparing for the large winter storms that are bound to hit the U.S. over the next few months. Road crews have been busy stocking salt, getting snow plows ready, and completing last-minute road work to make sure major road networks throughout the country are prepared for this winter season. That being said, that does not mean that road crews from the southeast are preparing the same way as road crews in the northeast, as Erica will now explain.
Thanks, Scott. As we know, a state's Department of Transportation is responsible for maintaining major roadways. Each state decides how much money and resources they want to put in their own Department of Transportation. Each state is able to set aside a certain amount of their yearly budget for winter weather expenses, such as salt and snow plows, to clear roadways of ice and snow. For example, a northeast state such as Pennsylvania has around 1.2 million tons of salt and around 20,000 snow removal vehicles ready to go each winter season. However, a state farther south, such as Georgia, only has around 50,000 tons of salt and a little under 400 snow removal vehicles to use each season.
Obviously, a state in the Northeast like Pennsylvania has far more snow removal equipment than Georgia. Why is that?
It makes sense for different states to have different levels of preparation for winter weather. As we take a look at this map of total average snowfall across the country, you can clearly see that some areas of the country get a lot more snow than others. Areas such as the Rockies out west, as well as the Northeast, get far more snow than areas farther south, such as Texas or Southeast states. But that does not mean that these areas farther south get no snowfall. In fact, small snowfall amounts in those regions can have a more crippling effect on roadways than larger snowfall amounts farther north. Why is that, Erica?
Well, Scott, as mentioned earlier, road crews from the southeast don't have as many resources for dealing with snow. So when snow starts to fall, crews struggle to keep all major roadways clear. Another reason is that people from those states are less experienced in dealing with snow. It is very unlikely for snow to fall in these states as compared to states farther north. That being said, when a winter storm does hit an area as far south as Atlanta, Georgia, it can cause serious damage. In fact, less than 2 years ago, a winter storm dropped a mere 2.5 inches of snow in the large southeast city. However, this was enough snow to force motorists to leave their vehicles stranded on the highway due to the hundreds of accidents and traffic jams that occurred. Road crews were unprepared for this winter storm, and the city of Atlanta suffered greatly.
Well, let's hope that road crews all across the country are fully prepared for this winter.
Let's hope so. But as we all know, we are not in charge of Mother Nature. All we can do is be prepared and learn from past mistakes. One simple thing we can do when winter weather hits is to simply stay off the roads. Most accidents during winter storms occur when motorists try to drive on untreated roadways. Road crews do their best to keep snow and ice off major roadways, but they can only work so fast. To stay safe, it's important to stay off the roads during winter storms so that road crews can do their jobs and get the roads clear and safe for travel as quickly as possible.
That's a great point, Scott.
Well, that wraps it up for this week's Weather Risk segment. Thanks, as always, for coming on our show.
As always, thank you for having us on your show this week.
We are proud to represent the Weather Risk Management Club, and we wish everyone safe travels this winter.
Welcome back to the show.
We now have a special feature by Sean Romeo with details on one crucial aspect of weather forecasting: satellites.
Weather forecasting has improved dramatically over the past 40 years, in large part because of the launch of weather satellites. However, as these satellites age, the probability that one of them fails becomes greater. If a satellite were to fail, which may happen as early as 2016, a gap in weather and climatology data from polar orbiting satellites could also occur.
According to Dr. John Neese, Associate Head for Undergraduate Programs, Department of Meteorology, there is no gap at the moment and will only exist if a satellite were to fail. It has been talked about for years amongst meteorologists, but as time went on, since we haven't sent a replacement satellite, people have begun to talk about it more. If one of the polar orbiting satellites fails, they will have to depend on data from satellites from other countries. It is unclear how the gap, if it occurs, will be problematic. Truth is, we will get somewhat less data into our computer models, and that might have an impact on the quality of forecasts, even though this is debated.
The debate about NOAA's polar orbiting satellites has been talked about in Congress since Superstorm Sandy back in 2012. However, costs and delays have held back in the replacement satellite's development. A satellite gap of any length will have a large impact on the meteorological community. Weather satellites provide invaluable data to forecasters. Polar orbiting satellites account for 80% of data that gets put into computer model forecasts regarding current conditions. It is that data that allows meteorologists to make predictions several days in advance. To better understand how much of an impact it will have, let's take a look at Superstorm Sandy from 2012 with and without this data.
Here in this image is the European model's prediction of Superstorm Sandy before its eventual landfall on the Jersey Shore. Now take a look what happens when the polar orbiting data is taken out of the European model at the exact same moment. As you can see, the difference is astonishing. Without that data, the model would have predicted Sandy moving out into the North Atlantic. This is a significant difference in prediction and one that could have dire consequences, as the property damages and death tolls from Superstorm Sandy would have been significantly higher if we were without this crucial data. And that is the fear among meteorologists, that without this data, the ability to predict major weather events such as floods, tornadoes, even the path of the hurricanes can put lives and property in harm's way, especially if it's towards heavily populated areas like where Superstorm Sandy eventually made landfall.
There are several potential solutions to this problem. The first and likely best option is to launch a replacement satellite for the satellite in question. However, right now the replacement satellites aren't scheduled to go up until 2018. Another alternative is that we use satellites from other organizations, such as the European Union or the Chinese, to get the data. The problem with that alternative is that it would be somewhat less data that would go into our computer models to accurately predict the weather. Without this data, graphics like these would become obsolete. These images are vital to weather forecasting and the meteorological community at large. If a solid solution is not found soon, our forecasting abilities will be degraded. This potential satellite gap is expected to occur in 2016 and is predicted to last for longer than a year if current predictions hold true. For Up in the Air, I'm Sean Romeo.
And I'm Daniel Petit.
Thanks for tuning back in.
Casey is now standing by at the climate wall with your 8 to 14 day climate outlook. Casey?
Thanks so much, Nathan and Hunter. Looking at our averages for November 19th, 47 degrees for our average high and 32 for the low. And for our precipitation for the month of November, our average is about 3.3 and almost 2.5 inches of snow and ice. So we haven't seen any of that yet, but we might be seeing some later this month. Looking at the snow and ice totals for current depth across the United States, nothing over in the eastern portions, but as we look out into the west, definite snow covering all across the west. And here in Denver, Colorado, a picture from Aspen, mainly snow covered all across the area on the buildings and up in the mountains. Definitely skiers will be loving that situation that they're in right now. Looking at the current pattern that we're in, a ridge is forming over most of the eastern portion of the United States, bringing these warmer temperatures into the area, and that will continue as we get into the 8 to 14 day outlook for the temperature, well above normal for this time of year up in the New England states, and in State College definitely above normal as well. But as we get into the eastern portion of the United States, below normal temperatures that they are seeing, and this is helping the snow to stay on the ground in their area as well. And looking at the precipitation outlook for 8 to 14 days, that's November 25th to December 1st, above normal for majority of the United States here, as we see in the Plains and State College as well. But as we get out into the west, below normal still seeing a drought in California and up in Washington, definitely below normal amounts of precipitation for the next coming weeks. And as we look out in the drought, like Nathan was talking earlier about, we are still seeing a major drought in California. It doesn't seem like that will come to an end anytime soon. And we are still looking at some portions of the United States still having a minor drought, but not too much to be worried about. Back to you, Nathan and Hunter at the desk.
Thanks, Casey.
Well, that's all we have for this week's episode.
Thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.
But until then, I'm Nathan Flinchbaugh.
And I'm Hunter Williams. We'll see you next time, Up in the Air.